guest today is David Icke. Hello, David.
Hi, Norbert.
Thank you very much for finding time.
Pleasure.
What I would like to do today is to explain to our viewers the way how they are manipulated, how can they find out they are manipulated, and whether the dumbing down of the nations is the part of it or not.
Well, all those three things are true. All those three things are different expressions of the same thing. Because if you're going to control people, and the number of people that are in full knowledge of what their agenda is and what they're trying to achieve in terms of transformation of global society is tiny compared with the target population. So you can control the population, if you like, physically, with tanks in the streets and soldiers at the door, up to a point, and it's a very small point. If you're going to control billions of people, and you're a relative handful, the way you control them is through their perceptions. Because perception is everything. Your perception dictates what you accept, what you don't accept, what you challenge, what you won't challenge, what you will support and what you won't support. From perception comes everything. And you know, when we talk about people taking things for granted, one of the things that people take for granted more than anything else is their perceptions. Because they perceive that their perceptions are a result of free thought, their own free thought. I have come to this conclusion. But the methods of perception manipulation, well, they're blatant to anyone that wants to really look at it. But to those that don't, it's very subtle. But it's incessant. And if you go through the process of why most people see the world in a certain way, you can see where this comes from. Because you're born into the world, and immediately you enter the world, your perceptions of reality start to be influenced by your parents. And your parents have been through the process that you're about to go through. Yeah. Then, and you know, it's like people accept things because they've always been like that. So this is how they are, this is the norm. But when you take a step back and look at it from a bigger perspective, the speed with which a child comes into the world and then hits the school system is extraordinary and getting smaller. And so very soon after you enter this world, you find yourself sitting at a desk with an authority figure representing the state in front of you, a teacher, telling you when you have to be there, when you can leave, when you can speak, when you can go to the toilet. In other words, now you're entering that stage of conformity to rules, which is designed to take you through your entire lifetime. And also these teachers are telling you what is and what isn't, what's possible, what's not possible, the state's version of history, the state's version of reality, everything, science. And then you go through this process at least 5 days a week for your childhood, and then you go up into college and university, and you go on to another level, but it's a continuation of the same thing. And then at the end of this whole process, which is in effect 15, 16, 17, 18 years of a perception download of reality, you take this perception of reality out into the adult world. You go into journalism, you go into science, quantum physicists apart, most of them anyway. You go into medicine, you go into politics, you go into corporations, and you take, and like I say, the media, journalists, and you take with you into these institutions this core programming of reality, this core download. And it is such a ludicrously narrow band of possibility, based, for instance, on the world being solid and physically real, when actually quantum physics has shown that that's not the case. But that's cast aside with the program.
Okay, David, who are we to say that whatever they are downloading throughout these 16, 18 years, that it's not right?
Well, just by researching beyond it, I call this download the postage stamp consensus, because when you research deeper into the nature of reality and also the nature of the world and world events, and also into history, which is written by the winners, you start to realize that the version of everything that you've been given, like I was through your formative years, was overwhelmingly, not entirely, but overwhelmingly either nonsense, either completely untrue, or a series of half-truths. And so what you do when you go into these institutions, you take that download with you, and then the institutions confirm that to each other that the download is true, the download is real, it's how things are. So doctors take their point of reference for healing and health from science. Journalists report the world from the point of view of this postage stamp consensus.
Now I have to stop you. I haven't seen reporting for a long time. They are telling you, at least the last 15, 20 years, they are telling you what they think and how the things work. They are not reporting anymore.
Exactly. And this point of reference that journalists take, there are some journalists, particularly the owners of the media, who are consciously putting out information to mislead and manipulate the perceptions of the population, thus their reaction and response to what is happening in the world. But, I was a journalist for a long time in the mainstream, and most of them are not knowingly manipulating. They are coming from the point of view of the postage stamp consensus. And that says that anyone who steps off the postage stamp and says, hold on a minute, there are other ways of looking at the world, they're immediately dismissed as mad or dangerous. And the other thing is, from the point of view of journalistic and political postage stamp consensus, there's no such thing as a conspiracy. Now, when you look at the definition of conspiracy, it is merely two or more people coming together to conspire illegally to
against someone else.
Yeah, and to create a conclusion. So on that basis, the world is drowning in conspiracies. But what has happened is this in this area alone. In the 1960s, after the Kennedy assassination, followed of course by Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, in America and wider afield, people started to look at this and say, hold on a minute, this is connected. What's gone on? What's behind this? They were saying the idea that Kennedy was shot from behind from the book depository when his head was clearly on the Zapruder film, shot from the front, and he recoiled backwards. And Jackie Kennedy tried to get out of the back of the car because she knew where the bullet had come from. She wasn't going to head towards the bullet, was she? So these things were obviously being questioned. So what the CIA did, and the documents exist to prove this, is that they, shall we say, encouraged major media outlets in America to use the term conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist to discredit those people that were questioning what obviously needed questioning. And still today, and you will have experienced this, I'm sure, when I was in Australia, I was in the mainstream media a lot in Australia. And again it was like, but you're a conspiracy theorist. All these decades later, the mainstream media is still using the term that the CIA brought into widespread use.
It's the same in Central Europe.
Yeah.
Because they still hope that once they label you, that you will walk away.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea behind it. But there are people who wouldn't walk away, like yourself.
But I was saying to these questioners in Australia, and I saw their jaws start to drop when I said this. See, most journalists are in such a, again, perception bubble. This is what people need to realize, is that the perception bubble, the download of desperately limited senses of reality and everything, is not only where much of the population is coming from, it's where the scientists are coming from, it's where the doctors are coming from, it's where the journalists are coming from. Thus, they are as perception imprisoned and enslaved as anybody else. The unfortunate thing is they stand between the authorities and what the public hears and believes to be
but
true.
David, they can say, and they do say it all the time, that it's scientifically backed, the information they downloaded or we downloaded at the school, and it's right, and you are crazy, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
So you know, what can you tell?
Well, as I was going to say, I was pointing out, because what they were saying is, you're questioning 9/11, as if they were incredulous. You're questioning 9/11. And you know, what about the families? How would the families feel? Well, do you think the families don't want to know what happened? But then I pointed this out, and this shows the depth of the program of mainstream journalism. I said to them, were there weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? They said, well, no. I said, so we were lied to, right, about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq to justify a catastrophic war and the catastrophe that's followed? Well, yeah. I said, the very same people, not just the same agencies, the very same people that told you the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq to justify a catastrophic war were exactly the same people that told you the official story of 9/11. And so we have and their jaws started, well, actually, that's true. But they hadn't thought about it. And it's this journalistic schizophrenia. And let's look at where that's come from. No weapons of mass destruction now in Iraq is a gimme. Why? Because there were no weapons of mass destruction. But the official story of 9/11 is still the one they take, because unless evidence like weapons of mass destruction not being there comes to light, all that mainstream journalism does basically is take the official story of everything and just repeat it. They're not journalists, they are public relations officers for the official version of everything.
Isn't it their job actually to question the official stories of anything?
Well, exactly. I mean,
shouldn't this be their job?
The point is that the alternative media, people like you and me and others, have emerged to fill a void. And that void is in people doing what you're saying, questioning the official version of reality, and the official version of world events. And if you question them, and what is said by officialdom stands up, fair enough. But often, almost all the time, it doesn't, and the mainstream media doesn't do that immediate questioning. So we're talking about perception manipulation. One of the great, most profound and constantly used perception manipulation, communally in the world, is something I call problem reaction solution, where you want to change society in a certain way, and you know that if you openly announce this is what we're going to do, you're going to get a resistance and a reaction against it. So you don't openly do it. You play problem reaction solution. The 33rd degree of Freemasonry has a Latin motto, ordo ab chaos, order out of chaos. And so problem reaction solution is another way of saying that. You create the chaos, you create the problem covertly, you blame someone or something else for it. You then tell, and this is the point, you then tell the public through an unquestioning media the version of that problem that you want them to believe, even though it's a lie. And then you want the reaction from the public that says, you have fear, you say, this can't go on, something must be done, do something. And then those who've covertly created the problem and blame someone else got the reaction, either do something or people open to something being done, then offer the solutions to the problems that they have covertly created, which advances this agenda of further human control. And they are often overwhelmingly solutions and changes that would never have been accepted by the public without the initial covert problem. Now, what's the antidote to that? Well, there's two things. There's the antidote from the public, which says a simple question: who benefits? Who benefits from me believing the official version of this event? And invariably, almost every time, it will be anyone that wants to justify further control, further surveillance, further war, further big brother state. And the other antidote to problem reaction solution is journalism doing its job, which now the alternative media have to do because the mainstream media won't do it. And that is, when the official version of these problem reaction solution events are announced, you question it, you dissect it, and see if it stands up. And that's what the alternative media has been doing.
Someone might ask, why would I question it? It's authority, and there are really nice people and good people and whatnot. But the thing is that historically, we know that these people who are claiming something today, a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they were lying to us.
Yeah.
So that's enough for me. That's the only reason I will question it, because I know these people have been lying to us.
Well, this is the kind of schizophrenia that goes on. I mean, I talked about journalists who accept there weren't weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, but believe the official story of 9/11 when both were given by the same people. That is journalistic schizophrenia. And there is public schizophrenia in the sense that over and over people say, you never believe what you read in the papers, and then they go ahead and do it. And they say, politicians, they lie. Politicians, they're liars. They're always telling you lies. Okay. So when they give you the official version of 9/11, why do you believe them? Right? Why do you believe them? Because, right, you say, the whole history of politics and military and media is that we're constantly lied to.
All right, I'll ask you this question. I'll repeat actually whatever you said. Why do they believe? Do they want to believe because some different answer would really ruin their life or perception of their lives, and they are subconsciously trying to go towards the official version because that's the easiest way and maybe the way which would hurt them the least? Why are the people willing to believe a blatant lie?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons, and I think the one you highlighted is certainly one of them. There's also the fact that this perception download includes perception of self, so that people see themselves in little me terms. There's also the perception of the world which comes out as hierarchy, which are there are those that know and those that don't, or they're educated. People say about scientists, they're so clever and they're so educated. People give their power away to doctors because they say, oh, the doctors are so clever, they must know what they're doing. This is the big fallacy. The big fallacy. That all scientists know what they're doing. History shows they don't. Thalidomide, just one example. They don't. Invariably, when you go through the history of science, the mainstream of science has invariably, with the hindsight of time, been wrong. Until the 1920s, they said there was one galaxy. Now they say that there's probably between 100 and 500 billion galaxies. And that's just in a relatively few decades. And so there is this giving your power away to authority, because somehow authority knows. It doesn't. And then there is that area that you talk about where people really don't want to think that things aren't as they seem. Because
why?
Well, because they fear the fact that there is some hidden network that, shall we say, seriously doesn't have their best interests at heart. They don't want to face that. They don't want to face the fact that invasions of Iraq and Libya and Syria were actually orchestrated and planned decades ago as part of a process
General Clark
of world takeover.
General Clark
Yeah.
Told the people. That's the other thing. I think last week we went through it. These people are actually putting out white papers. They are telling you, I'm going to come, get you, kill you, do this, do that to your family, 1, 2, 3, 4 decades ahead.
Yeah.
And people don't pay attention to it. They don't want to believe it. And then when it's happening, you tell them it's happening, and they go like, no.
No, exactly. Because we're back to the postage stamp consensus. It doesn't just operate as a perception download. It operates as a self-defense mechanism in the sense that people won't go into areas outside of the download for information. So all they get is confirmation of the download. That's what you get from the mainstream media. They're not going to give you information outside of the download perception of reality. They're just going to keep confirming it because most of the journalists who are doing it are in that same perception prison as everyone else. And so what you have is that the great majority of people go through an entire lifetime just having this sense of normal being constantly confirmed. And what has happened with the alternative media, we've making inroads into that. And I know from my own experience, so will you, that there are people that actually suddenly have a peek over here and say, hold on a minute, this version of that makes more sense than that does. And they start to question like they didn't before. There are many positive things happening. But if people only just looked, why do I believe this? Trace it back to source. Where does it come from? And it will come from a teacher. It will come from, this is the other great thing, is that it's not only that people going out into the institutions are confirming to each other that this downloaded normal is how things are. Through peer pressure, people outside the institutions in the general population are also confirming to each other that the download of normal is how things are and policing their own prison. People laugh at sheep because they follow the one in front and get into line when the sheepdog barks because of fear. We've out-sheeped the sheep. We don't need a sheepdog. We keep each other in line. And
ourselves as well.
Yes, by doing that, yes. It's like, this is how I've described it over a number of times over the years. It's like prisoners sitting in a cell and someone cracks the code to the cell door, and as he goes to run out, the other prisoners grab him back. And if we would only set each other free to allow the free flow of opinion, even though we might not agree with it, then we'd start to break down this prison perception that people think is free thought. This is the thing. People say, what is your opinion? This is one of the, what's your opinion? Well, my opinion is, so hold on a second, before we go any further, where does your opinion come from? And you'll trace it back and it comes from some external source which they're just repeating.
Now, why is the reason that the people are actually doing it? Is it their laziness or fear, or does it offer them some comfort? Why would they do it?
Well,
because some of them subconsciously know that something is wrong.
Yeah, actually, that before we go any further, that is a very important point. What I'm finding as I'm traveling the world is that there is an increasingly vast number of people who may not yet be looking at this information in any detail, but they've come to this point where they have an unease about the world. They don't like the way it's going, they feel uneasy about it, and that is teasing open their minds to get another version of actually what's going on, because the version they're being given makes no sense. But I remember I did an interview on a BBC current affairs program, the only ever time they've ever asked me on. It's a few months ago now. And there was a former well-known British politician across from me. And he was asked by the presenter about what he thought of conspiracy theories. And he said the most ludicrous thing. He said, well, I think that, it's intellectual laziness. So I was on him immediately. Because the ultimate intellectual laziness is not to question authority, it's to accept authority's versions of things without question. That's intellectual laziness. So there is some laziness in it.
So he just turned it around.
Yeah, but I turned it back. There is some laziness in it for sure. Although I can't be bothered, mate. I can't be bothered about it. And it's like ignorance is bliss, but only for a while. You can put your head in the sand and ignore what's going on. I don't want to talk about it. Change the subject. But your backside is still in the air. Yeah. And there's a hurricane still coming, right? Or there's a tornado still coming. Now, whether you put your head in the sand to be oblivious that a tornado's coming or not, the tornado's still coming. Now, if you lift your head up, turn and face it, you can take avoiding action. But for sure, if you don't, your backside's going to be spinning in the air very shortly. And so ignorance is bliss, but only for a while. And I do think we're reaching the point where this agenda for human control is starting to become more visible to people, that more people are lifting their heads out of the sand. There's no question that, not the majority yet, of course, but more are doing that, which is very encouraging. But there is this whole process as well that people really, and I've met many people like this, they know that something's not right, but they really don't want to face what's not right because it's just too much for them. Yeah, so they ignore it. And they claim it's not happening.
Why? The reason why they are actually, some of the people are noticing it, because this globalization and the control of the people has been on steroids for like last 5-10 years. Why are they going now, so fast after it? Why are they? Because it had been built up for the last couple of centuries, and slowly. But the last maybe 5-10 years, it's really, really bad. So why are they in a hurry?
I think there's two reasons for that. First of all, there is a point, which I was saying years ago, there's going to come a point where the hidden becomes the seen, or at least some of it. Because if you are manipulating covertly to change human society in a certain way, then there comes a point where if you're going to do that, that society has to start to change, to reflect what you want. So they've reached the point now where the hidden is increasingly becoming the seen, as with more and more surveillance, more and more control, more and more imposition. Political correctness, censoring the most basic things that people are supposed to be allowed to say. We're seeing Facebook and Google more and more blatantly censoring information, and of course, what's happening in the Middle East and with terrorism. People, so much of what has been covert before is now in the scene and has to be. Otherwise, they can't change society. So there's that level of it, but there's also another level of it, and that is they are absolutely aware that there will come a point, and it's starting, when the way they are changing society in the realm of the scene is so blatantly going in a certain direction that it's going to get lots of people looking up and saying, what's going on? What's going on? And so they're trying to get it through as quick as possible. And this is what they want. They want a vicious police military state, because global state, because they want the police and the military to be expressions.
I grew up in one.
Yeah.
See, most of the people here, we grew up in one. We know. Yeah. That's why, for example, the Central European countries, they don't want the immigrants.
Yeah.
We've been there. We don't really want the society which's been built up by these neo-Marxists in the West. We lived it, and trust me, it's awful. We know it.
Oh yeah.
We've been there, so that's why we are really trying to deflect it.
Yeah.
We don't want it. But the question is.
Well, what I would say there to people in Central Europe that have experienced this, if they're old enough, is the point is they want a global version of that.
Yeah, I know.
And thus, what you've experienced and you seriously didn't like, quite understandably, they want to bring back and make that the norm globally. And they know that there's going to come a point where people are going to see that and there's going to be a reaction against it. So, and it's starting. So what they want, this is when you come to your point about why is it happening so quickly, they want to get that police military state and massive constant 24/7 surveillance, not least electronically, in place before that reaches a point where it becomes seriously dangerous to their designs. So that when people are starting to respond and wanting to do something, they have that surveillance in place. It's not, absolutely not, blatantly not, to protect us from terrorism. That is the excuse, not least because they're the terrorists ultimately. It is using the fear of terrorism to get the population to accept this police military state, surveillance state, to protect the agenda, the unfolding agenda from challenge. That's why it's there.
All right, so can we say that the theory of problem, reaction and solution would be what's going on in the United States, let's say with the Black Lives Matter? Yeah. We are talking about now divide and conquer. So George Soros put about $70 million into Black Lives Matter, which is an extremist organization, and they are playing off of each other two races, let's say in the United States. Here in Europe, they are bringing these immigrants here. Is it the reason why is this happening to actually to create that fear in the people?
Yeah, well, there's
because on the end of the day, whatever, if those two groups there or here will clash, we will ask for a police state.
Exactly. I mean, the easiest way to get a police state and other extreme situations in is to create problems to which a police state is the solution. This is what, look at every time there's a terrorist attack in Europe. The answer is more control, more surveillance, more armed police and military on the streets, and so on. Now, in my new book, Phantom Self, and in the talks like on Saturday, I quote a guy called Dr. Richard Day. And he was a Rockefeller insider. He was an executive of Planned Parenthood, which is a Rockefeller organization that started out in the eugenics movement, which the Rockefellers were big time behind. And in 1969, he stood up, no one knows why, but he did, at a meeting of pediatricians in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, because he was a doctor. And he asked them to not take notes and to turn off any recording equipment, because he was going to tell them how the world was going to change, because that which he was part of was going to change it. And he came out with a series of things. It must have been a long talk, because a lot of things that he said. There was a doctor in the audience called Lawrence Donegan who did take notes. And a few, before he died in 2004, he did a series of interviews which went out on an internet site, describing what Day had said in 1969. And he was describing the world now in very detailed ways, extraordinarily so.
Rockefeller was.
He was talking about the internet in 1969, which apparently was only invented through CERN in something like 1989. He was talking about smart TVs, which only came out in 2008, because Orwell was talking about smart TVs, the telescreens, in 1948, because this agenda is long, long term. And one of the things that he said was going to happen is that they were going to have mass immigration into countries, because he said it's easier to break down cultures and to change society in countries where there are many people that don't have any roots, his words, or history in those countries. And when I look at the situation of migration, whenever something happens very quickly and is then everywhere, the alarm bells should go off. I mean, just as a quick aside, take fracking. Fracking came out of nowhere, and suddenly it was everywhere. People protesting all over the world about fracking. Where did that come from? And if you look at what happened, and it's all a perception deception, there was this horrific picture of a little boy dead on a beach who had died as a result of him and his family and others trying to get out of the Middle East into Greece.
That was the official version.
Yeah, that was the official version, yes. And suddenly, obviously, there was an outpouring from people that saw that picture of emotion, of compassion. Now, there's nothing easier to manipulate than genuineness that's not streetwise. And the idea is to feel the compassion, but then ask yourself, why am I being shown this now? Now let's look what happens after it. And it was immediately after that picture circulated, and there's this outrage of this outpouring rather of understandable compassion, that the real big pouring into Europe of people started. This is when Merkel opened the floodgates, not just to people fleeing wars created by the West. My response to that is yes, there is a reason why those people should be helped by those countries that created the wars. But that's not what happened. Yes, there were refugees from war, but the vast majority of people pouring into Europe on the back of that emotional outpouring triggered by that picture were young men. They weren't even families, which of course has created tremendous upheavals in places like Germany and Sweden and elsewhere. And if you remember, when this great enormous number of people started arriving at German railway stations, there were Germans on the platform clapping them in. You know why? Because the perception deception within those people, they were relating those people coming off the trains to that little boy on the beach. This is how perception deception works, and manipulating people's perceptions through emotions is the easiest gateway to perception.
They are not clapping anymore, are
They're
they?
not clapping anymore, and I said at the time, you know, they're clapping now, but they won't be clapping soon, because two things. First of all, they're different cultures. Now, you're supposed to be racist if you say that. Excuse me, that's not racist, that's absolute blatant fact. They're different cultures. And what they want to do, and this is the plan, is they want to break Europe up into subservient regions to the European Union bureaucracy under a world government, and bring an end to nation states. Because nation states have a sense of culture, they have a sense of history, and a relation to a nation state is a great resistance to having the nation state disappear. So stage one of this absolutely blatant opening the door to Europe is to dilute a sense of culture. The other thing is they want the clashes. They want the clashes because that gives you divide and rule, and that gives you not only a reason for the police state, but you, as you rightly point out, people in fear of what's happening, like civil war, demanding the police state. That's what it's about. And I would say to people all over Europe, don't see things in black and white, otherwise you're going to be played like a stringed instrument. If you look at the indigenous populations of Europe, and you look at the migrants coming in, if you could see symbolically what was happening, you'd see strings attached to the migrants, you'd see strings attached to the indigenous population, and those strings would be held by the same hand. They're playing people off against each other. And it's interesting, you know, so often over the years, the BBC, which is a kind of state-owned, controlled organization, whatever they claim, has put out so-called factional documentaries, like documentaries that are kind of supposed to be part fiction, part factual, who turned out monumentally accurate. And for instance, there was a documentary which was based on the fact that bombs had gone off in London tubes. And they had the politicians and the people reacting. That was what the documentary was about. In 2005, the London bombings known as 7/7 were an absolute mirror of what was in that documentary. And I remember, it must have been a few decades ago now, the BBC ran this documentary, which was based on vast numbers of people pouring into Europe out of the Middle East and North Africa and transforming European society and creating the clashes and the conflict that followed. So when you have people like the notorious George Soros, who not only is saying that he wants, vast numbers of people coming into Europe ongoing, well, these mansions must be full then. Whenever Soros, who is a bagman for the Rothschilds, that's how he went out of Hungary and became a billionaire.
Didn't they provide him with education, the London School of Economics?
Yeah, excuse me. But it's people say, oh, he's very clever, he's a billionaire. Becoming a billionaire by playing the markets, when you know, because that which you are part of controls the markets, you know when the market's going up and the market down. Anybody can be a billionaire. Okay, the market's going to go up. Okay, I'll get into this. Market's going down. Okay, I'll get out of that.
People don't know that the game is rigged?
The game's completely rigged. So when Soros opens his mouth, this hidden hand is speaking. Not every now and again, not when there's an R in the month, all the time. So you look at Soros, you've mentioned him already in terms of Black Lives Matter and the attempt of a race war in America, and that's absolutely the case. And there was a local television station, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago in America that exposed the fact that Soros and Soros front organizations, one of them I think was called Welcome America, was trying to pour people into parts of America out of middle America, Central America, with the exact same agenda of transforming those societies into a different culture. And he's behind that going on in the United States. He's behind what's going on in Europe. And so when you look at Chancellor Merkel, I mean, she is a front person for this hidden hand down to her DNA. So this starts to explain to German people and
David,
others in Europe about why suddenly she opened the floodgates, because it's destroying
She surely must see now that it's not right, and she's still standing behind this decision.
Exactly that.
There are two options. She either really wants it or someone told her to do it.
Yeah.
Or she's stupid. And I don't think she's stupid.
No, she's not stupid. She's very, very calculating and not stupid. Well, she's not got an expanded consciousness, so she wouldn't do what she's done. But intellectually, she's not stupid. And the whole point that I've been trying to get across over these years is that the front people for this hidden hand are terrified of the hidden hand, because they know what the hidden hand does when it's crossed. And therefore, she is more frightened of the hidden hand than she is of the German people. And as you rightly say, she is committing electoral suicide. But by the time that she is removed, which she almost certainly will be as a result of all this, and the election results in Germany are catastrophic for her and her party, then vast numbers of people will be in Germany and the die will be cast. And that's not a condemnation of the people coming in, although let's not, let me say this. People see the whole world in black and white. Therefore, it's all Muslims bad, all Muslims good. Muslim people that I've known and met in the Middle East and around the world are some of the kindest, gentlest, generous people I've ever come across. But to say that all Muslims are like that would be as stupid as to say all Muslims are bad and terrorists. We've got to see the shades of grey, otherwise there's no way we're going to get our heads around what's going on. And there's no doubt that there are people who call themselves Muslim, and overwhelmingly these Muslim extremists are actually not following Islam that most people are following. They're following Saudi Arabia's basically extreme Islam.
Yeah,
This is why Saudi Arabia chops people's heads off, and so does ISIS, because they're expressions of the same belief system. And most of that is manufactured. They don't chop people's heads off in Syria. I mean,
David,
and many other Muslims.
let me ask you this. There are over 1 million of them already in Europe. Yeah. Now they came in, no one checked them.
No, exactly.
Now, how can you tell which one is which? Which one is the terrorist? Which one is the kind one?
Well, this is the problem that has everyone cast with the same perception of who they are. But there was an undercover reporter for a French television station who went undercover with a terrorist, quote, terrorist cell in Europe. And when he came out and talked about it, he said the shocking thing was basically there was no Islam involved at all. These were just kids who were suicidal, who were on drugs, who were completely lost. And there was no mention of Islam. And they had been promised that if they, did these things, they would get paradise and all that stuff as a result of it. They were just bits of kids being manipulated. And if you go through the process, you have these people that carry out these terrorist attacks, and some actually are carried out directly by the security agencies wearing face covers and armory like has happened in America. They say this person's done that, but you don't know that, because when they did it, the only thing people saw were people in masks and with weapons. They didn't see their faces. But you've got these kids that carried it out. Then you've got the next level. You've got the leaders of these terrorist organizations. Then you've got military intelligence, like the CIA, British intelligence, and Mossad. Now, these kids here don't know that exists. And then above that, you're going deeper into
No, they don't know that it exists above them.
No. They think they're carrying out these terrorist attacks for whatever reason they are. They don't realize that because of compartmentalization, that actually they're carrying them out on behalf of the very authorities they think they're carrying them out against. Yes. This is the inversion. And so if we equate Islam as its I don't practice any religion. I think I have a phrase: religion is the greatest form of mind control ever invented. But if we cast everyone that follows Islam in a peaceful way with these kind of people who's no longer in control of their minds, then this divide and rule is going to be catastrophic in Europe. And I would say this. Let's not look at what people believe. Let's not look at what they look like. Let's look at what they do. And there's no question, it's quite blatant, that, for instance, there is a completely different dynamic and perception of women and the role of women and the subordination of women among so many of these migrants into Europe following Islam in its various forms, that this is where this great problem has occurred in places like Germany and Sweden of attacks on women. It's because the way women are seen is not in the same way that they're seen in Europe. And it's no good people saying that's racist, it's fact. I mean, you look at Saudi Arabia at its most extreme. They can't drive cars, women. They can't basically go anywhere without a chaperone. You've got women in these extreme places like Pakistan who are stoned to death for being frickin' raped, right? I mean, it's absolute madness. That's the extreme. This unbelievable male domination and disrespect for women. Like women are just slaves to be used and told what to do. Now, if some of that mentality is coming into Europe, it's not going to stop having that mentality, and we must face the fact. Again, we're into shades of grey. Are the vast majority of migrants coming into Europe abusing women? No, they're not, and they never would. Are some of them doing it? Yes, they are. And instead of saying we can't talk about that, we must think it's all like that, it's not. And this is the point. What these people are doing is creating the very thing that they say they don't want to happen, and that is a way of looking at what's happening with a frustration that you can't articulate how you feel about it.
Why?
Because of political correctness, you're a racist.
Now, hold on. This racist card has been used everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, in Central Europe, the media, they are trying to use it.
Yeah.
To a certain way, it's working.
Yeah.
But we don't have a chip on our shoulders. See, we haven't gone outside of our countries. We didn't invade and kill people. We didn't rob them from their natural resources.
Right.
So, if someone is a bad person or anything else, I don't care whether it's blue, black, or,
Exactly.
you're a prick.
Exactly.
That's it. Yeah. So here the racist card doesn't really fly, but in Western Europe, it's a very often used, and actually it works really well on people, especially on white people. Why would it work on them? You know, you didn't go to Africa and kill, black people, or you didn't enslave them. Why would you?
Yeah, the British Empire did.
Yeah, but it wasn't you.
The most appalling empire in the history of the world.
David, but it wasn't you.
No.
It's like me hating a 20-year-old German girl because they were here and they killed millions of us. I'm not crazy. Why would I hate her?
Yeah.
So why does it work on people in Western Europe and in the United States?
Well, I think there's two things. First of all, you have what are called progressives. This is a word that's come out of America. Basically,
neo-Marxists.
Progressives that support people like Bernie Sanders to an extent. The very small part of them relate to the Democratic Party in general. Like Clinton, a lot of the progressives will be voting for Clinton. A lot of the progressives won't because of what happened to Bernie Sanders. And then this word progressive is actually being used for the same sort of people, the Greens and the left in politics in Britain as well. So you have the progressives, and they their heart has been transported from here to here, right? It's on their frickin' sleeve. Look at me, how pure I am. And therefore, you can't say anything about anyone who basically isn't white, because only white people are racist, of course. That's the way it seems to go. Racism is a state of mind, not a state of color. So they jump on anybody through political correctness and this reflex action, you're racist. And then you've got the others that actually would like to articulate how they feel, but are frightened of being labeled racist and having what they call now a Twitter storm against, we had a guy, a British actor, who was being interviewed in America, and he was being interviewed and complaining at racism and discrimination against black actors in Hollywood, right? But because he used the word coloured instead of black, Twitter storm, right? And he's coming out but basically on his knees. Oh, forgive me. I didn't
What's wrong with colour?
Didn't mean any offence. He's a white guy. I didn't mean any offence. And it's like, hold on. I mean, if somebody did that to me, I would post a finger on Twitter and go and have a cup of tea and say, I'll leave you to it, because the guy wasn't coming from a point of view of racism. He just used a word. But in a way of defending the fact that there was discrimination against black people, black actors in Hollywood. It's madness, but because people fear that reaction.
But David, what you are saying, it's not or whatever you're describing, it's not a political correctness, it's censorship.
Well, yeah, but political correctness has been created personally by the social engineering organizations, going back to things like the Frankfurt School, which was the Rothschild School, to get the population to censor each other. That's what political correctness is
or
about.
Themselves, auto-censorship.
It's not about political correctness. I go into this on Saturday. It's not about protecting people and not upsetting people. These guys couldn't give a damn whether people are upset or not. It's about using that as an excuse to get the population to censor itself, to get the herd to censor the herd. And I won't do that. I'll say what I think, and if people don't like it, they can do the other thing. That's fine by me. But so this is what it's about, and this is why people are frightened to speak out. And you see, what happens then is when people have no vehicle to just articulate how they feel about seeing their societies changed in various ways, they get more and more frustrated, and they get more and more, if you like, often extreme because of that frustration. If we had a debate, if we could see the shades of grey, if we could be fricking adult and say, hold on a minute, first of all, let's look at this migration. Let's forget Muslims, let's forget colour, let's forget everything. Let's look at numbers. If you have increasing unlimited numbers of people, no matter where their background comes from, coming into a specific area, you are going to have a situation, which is happening, where the services, the housing, everything the health services cannot cope. Therefore, on sheer numbers, we have to have an adult debate about how many numbers can be in certain areas without the whole of that society.
Otherwise, it's going to fall apart.
Yeah, exactly. What we can't have, well, I can, bugger it, but we can't in general have that debate openly because of the heart on the sleeves progressives, brackets, censors, saying you're racist if you want that debate, even on sheer numbers. Then we have a situation where there are cultural differences, and we have to acknowledge that. Someone coming in from a Muslim country where they've been Muslim all their lives, and that the whole country has been run on Muslim grounds with Muslim laws, coming into a country where that's not happening, there is a cultural difference there. Hello, intelligent life calling planet Earth, and we have to address that. We have to look at that. We have to be adult. We have to see the shades of grey and not the black and white. And then we have to also accept that while the vast majority of Muslims, and as I've said many times, the Muslims that I've met over the years are overwhelmingly some of the nicest, genuine, most generous people I've ever met. But some are not. And thus we have to address that which is not, while not branding everyone else with that which is not. But we can't have that debate, because if you want to talk about the abuse of women by people who have contempt for women, then that's racist as well. So what happens is the people that are pushing that agenda of you're a racist, shut up, are actually creating the very frustration and the very sense of there's nothing I can do, that brings out the more extreme reaction.
All right, so these procs, wouldn't they listen to an argument that this is not actually a race problem, it's a cultural problem?
Yeah, it's not about race. I mean, anyone that's looked at my work knows where I'm coming from. I say that what we are is awareness, a state of being aware. We don't have form in our ultimate state. We are sense of awareness. And these vehicles are vehicles to allow our awareness to experience certain realities, because, we don't want to get deep into this, but we think we're in a world. We're not. We're in a frequency band. The frequency band that we can decode into a visual reality is so tiny, it's laughable. Therefore, this world is just a place for our awareness to experience. And that awareness, that point of attention, of that same awareness, this is where I'm coming from, is experiencing through Muslim people, it's experiencing through black people, it's experiencing through Asian people, experiencing through middle class white people, and this association with what my body is relates to what I am, has created this situation where everyone sees everyone as apart from everyone else, and therefore the division lines of potential divide and rule are endless for this hidden hand to manipulate. So I am the ultimate non-racist in the sense that I'm saying we're all the same consciousness and the forms are only vehicles for experience. Thus, it's like, I've used this analogy. Racism is like two spacemen on the moon fighting over the fact that one spaceman's spacesuit was made by this company and is this color, and this spaceman's spacesuit was made by this company and is another color. I mean, we'd say, at Houston, we got a problem. These two spacemen on the moon have gone crazy. They're fighting over their different spacesuits. Well, that's what racism is. So where I'm coming from is absolutely that racism is the ultimate confirmation of a complete misunderstanding of reality and life itself. However, we still got to look at the fact that in the world that we're experiencing, there are perceptual differences and cultural differences which have to be addressed. And you can't just censor the fact, which is happening around Europe, that women are being abused by people with some people, not the vast majority, some people, with a different relationship to women and perception of women and their place in society than we have normally in Europe. We've got to address these things. And what's really unbelievable is that the feminist organizations that scream feminism all the time, oh, abuse of women, oh, women being put down. Okay, over here. What about what's happening in Saudi Arabia, right, to women? Oh, well, I don't know, we've got a meeting, I've never looked. Okay, what about the women that are being attacked sexually, etc., in places like Germany and Sweden? Oh no, can't talk about that, it's politically incorrect.
I've got a better one for you.
It's crazy.
Listen, about a month ago in Bratislava in Slovakia, there was this pride march, you know, the homosexuals, gay people, and they were marching with a banner which said, "Rainbow against Islamophobia." I've got that picture, it will be on the video. You know, you look at it and you go like, are you people crazy? What's wrong with those people? Why, you know, they are throwing them off the roofs.
Yeah.
There are, you know.
Because we are in a world that is constantly manipulated to see everything in black and white terms, and you know, I mean, not just, I don't mean that racially. I mean symbolically. There are no shades of grey, and if you look at the world and you look at history, the truth is always in the shades of grey. It's never in the black and white. And so while you've got people who are genuinely racist by reflex action. And I've seen some members of the so-called master race who claim to be the master race, and if they're the master race, well, I'd rather not be, thank you very much. But on the other side, you've got this progressive movement, which basically plays itself out through much of the media, like MSNBC and CNN and such like in America, for instance, but through other media as well. That is the other extreme that will not allow genuine debate and genuine interaction to take place, to look at things that are happening. And so while that will say that genuinely racial view of the world, racist view of the world is extreme, well, extremes have polarities. And the other polarity of this situation is that which calls itself progressive. The biggest problem with progressives, they're not progressive, and they're certainly not informed. And therefore you've got two extremes shouting at each other, and in the middle are a vast number of people who just want a debate about what they're concerned about. and to have what's actually happening circulated in the media instead of covered up and suppressed. And so, we have a situation where there are, for instance, women being abused and attacked, and therefore we have to address that. We have to openly discuss it and say, look, how do we stop this? Because by ignoring it because of political correctness, it's just going to go on, and it needs to be addressed. But at the same time, let's take that perception of women and the reality of the world and say that all Muslims are like that. They are not. My whole experience is that they're not, but some are, and so we need to address it and not stop being so politically incorrect that we can't say boo to a goose.
All right, last question. How do we get out of it?
Well,
because this is madness.
Yeah, madness.
Whatever is happening now, it's just.
I mean, to really get into it. This is why I talk for 10 hours. There's so many.
Give us a simple version.
There's so much backstory to get to basically how we change this. But
all right, I'll ask you differently. Just excuse me. What shouldn't the ordinary people, do so they won't be pulled into that stupid game?
If we keep it just on the level of the world that we experience, people have got to stop being so naive. You know this Dr. Richard Day from 1969? One of the things he said then is basically the reason that we can do this is that people don't ask the right questions. People are so naive, they don't ask the right questions. And ironically, the people most don't ask the right questions are the mainstream media. So instead of accepting the official version of everything, realize that there is an agenda for the incessant centralization of power to fewer and fewer hands. It's what we call globalization. That's one word people give to it, but it's more than that. There is an agenda for the 24/7 detailed surveillance of people, not least electronically. There's an agenda to introduce a police military state to impose the will of the few on the many. There is an agenda to create a world government, world central bank, world army, world currency, cashless. This is why cash is disappearing so fast around the world. And there is an agenda to get technology inside people called transhumanism, which I go into in the books and on Saturday in depth. It's a big story, it's so important to current events. To attach our perceptions to basically an artificial reality, what these people are calling a cloud. So this cloud, this technological reality, actually becomes our subconscious mind and is feeding our perceptions. So we become nothing more than computer terminals on a manufactured global internet. This is happening. So here's the point. Anything that happens in the world and any explanation of things happening in the world which justifies the movement towards any of those things I've just described, that's the agenda. And therefore the situations that have been created to justify that advancement are not happening by chance, they're not happening by accident, they are specifically designed to get people to accept that advancement of all those things I'm talking about. Who benefits? And if anyone benefits, that are those that want that to happen, then big time, don't accept it because they're lying to you. And also, realize that the whole history of authority is it lies to us. Why is it going to suddenly tell the truth now? It's ridiculous. And also, deeper into this, stop self-identifying just with your name and your life story and your income bracket and your race and your religion. They're just experiences. Start identifying with the fact that you are a state of awareness having those experiences. And when you do that, you start to see the world, and I know from experience, in much more expanded forms. That, what I call phantom self, name, life story, race, religion, sees everything as dots. When you move your self-identity to I am awareness having that those experiences, you start to see pictures. and you start to see the world in a completely different way. And those who can only see dots think those who can see pictures are crazy. Why? Because the norm is dots. That's not the norm, seeing pictures, so you must be mad. And so we have this other great inversion, that those who've allowed themselves, anyone can do it, allowed themselves to see the world in more expanded ways, are seen as insane by those who are still seeing the world in extremely limited ways.
But actually, to see the whole picture, isn't it a good way, or to look at it, is to make several steps back and look at it from this thing. So pull yourself emotionally out of the problem.
Now that's a massive point, Norbert. Massive point, because emotion is the gateway to perception manipulation. We've talked about the little boy on the beach. Look at the other picture that was used to advance a perception agenda about Assad and the Russians in Syria, the dust boy. And when you look at the background to that, that was all manipulated. And what is that? That's trying to enter perception through emotion. So it is a sense of looking at those pictures, obviously being emotionally touched by them, because although it might have been manipulation, it wasn't manipulation for the kids. But then don't get so pulled in, because look at problem, reaction, solution. It's not problem. Have a think about it, do a bit of research, see what you think, solution. It's problem, reaction, solution. Reaction. What does emotion do? It reacts. It doesn't look, it doesn't question, it reacts. So if we can still hold compassion, but not react